This year on the Frame Savers, content so nice we reviewed it twice.
Boom, 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 boom. That's for us YouTubers.
We YouTubers.
Mm-hmm. This is episode 50 of the Frame Savers 5-0. It's a pretty big milestone, and not only that, but this is the 2-year anniversary of the Frame Savers podcast. Big time. Parades out in a lot of the major cities just celebrating this moment. I think the president was going to give a speech about it. I think there's been some fireworks. So it's a pretty exciting time for everybody, I think, in the nation. But I'm really looking forward to it. How are you doing, Chad? I feel like we haven't talked in so long on the podcast.
Yeah, it's been a little while. I started a new job and moved, so I took a tiny little bit of time off of the podcast. I heard your episode with Donkey Kong Country with Spike, and I mentioned, if you just want to switch over to have him do all the episodes, I'll understand. I thought it was great.
Yeah, he did a great job. I've been using him to replace you in many ways for GDQ, commentary.
And I'm totally not developing a complex because of it.
Hugs. We text late at night, and just think about each other. But I mean, you're still number one, baby.
I've been getting fewer of those texts, so I was wondering what was up with that.
Yeah, that's weird. Your Snapchat's been dormant for like 2 weeks. No, he did a great job filling in. But you know what? I would not want anybody else here with me but you, Chad. And our guests when they come on. I like them too. But you're the one. You're the one for me.
They're a close second.
So, as we always do, as a tradition, we have traditions now. We've had a podcast for 2 years. We have traditions, things that we do
family
on a
traditions,
weekly and bi-weekly basis. It's crazy.
Someone has to bring the rutabaga pie.
Yeah. I don't even know what a rutabaga is. What have you been doing? What have you been speedrunning?
I just started tassing, making a tool-assisted speedrun of Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout. I had learned The Wizard of Oz for the 12-hour challenge. Not a good decision. I've worked on a bunch of games lately, actually. I've not really been able to find that one thing that catches my interest enough for me to go in on it. I've been kind of flying all over the place, but I feel like I'll eventually find something that catches my interest fully again.
You haven't been Pink Panthered lately.
I have not been Pink Panthered lately. Yeah, it's so nice when you have that game that's just like consistent content. You go home and you're like, okay, well, I got done with dinner, feel like streaming, and I already know what I'm going to play. I'm really excited about it. And then lately it's just been like, well, I mean, I'm going to turn on my stream and I give 5 minutes for the stream starting soon screen, and I spend that entire 5 minutes saying, what game am I going to play?
Yeah, I've been there. That's frustrating. I'm currently kind of in the middle of a obsession with the game myself. I finally, for my 12-hour challenge, I learned Final Fantasy VII. Finally, it's been a lifelong dream of mine. Not really lifelong.
You were born for this moment, John. You were born for this.
I've always loved the speedrun. I've always wanted to do it. I always said, I have a full-time job. I can never learn it. There's no time. I've seen why that's probably true. Sleep's something I miss, but it's been really cool learning it. It's a whole different challenge that I have never experienced in speedrunning with this whole speedrun for 13 hours straight. Now, if I was good at the game, it would end quicker, but just like having to like schedule when you pee and when you eat and it's not just speedrunning a game. It's just such a different experience.
It's like you got one of those pill bottles by your side, except for it's a bottle for snacks, and it says 3 hours into the run I'm allowed to have carrot sticks.
Yeah, that's what I need to start doing, because here's the thing: I drink a lot of fluids and I pee a lot, and so it doesn't combine well with I'm not good at Final Fantasy VII yet, and it takes me 13 hours to finish a run. So luckily my controller cord goes all the way to the restroom. That's a big, huge plus. That's just the way my setup works. It's a huge blessing. But
I guess you're not
a ton of fun.
I guess you're not fully committed. All the best speedrunners use catheters.
Yeah, that's what I need to get on. And then other than that, since we haven't talked in a while, just doing some. I've done some derust of a bunch of games. I've been streaming more frequently. Although lately it's been like 20 to 30 hours on the weekends, and then I'm burnt out during the week, the last couple weeks, because Final Fantasy VII's tough, and that's the game I want to put in. I want to play it right now. I want to stream tonight. I've literally thought. So if I start a run at like 8 p.m. and it goes all the way through, how can I get the energy for work and then just come home and sleep? That's when you know you're in a good place.
You could just do single disc runs in the meantime.
Yeah, but it's just it would make me so sad to be like, oh, now I'm done. So, but yeah, that's been a ton of fun. And just working on stuff. We actually have some events coming up, and so I have some D-Rust to do for one event. And you probably have D-Rust to do, right? Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. So one of the games I learned was Operation C. Well, since we talked, and that game I will be playing along with the Great Bebe's Kids and something else, Barbie Game Girl, and who else knows? Mega Man 2 Game Boy at something called Southeastern Speedrunners.
Yeah.
Southern
Southern
Southeastern.
Speedrun Summit. You were
Wow,
close.
I'm kicked out.
So
Sorry, guys.
so SSS is a little friendly get together we have every now and then with a group of our friends, and it's taking place this year September 2nd through the 4th. We usually try to aim for Labor Day weekend, and we stream it. It's just a bunch of games. It's a casual meetup of just a friend group, and you can find it at twitch.tv/southern speedruns. We really are only mentioning it because we're in it, but it does have a lot of fairly high profile speedrunners who do take part in it, so it does tend to be fairly well trafficked, and people do seem to enjoy it. So tune in if you'd like to.
If you like us, which you probably do, or else you're kind of, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know, masochist. I mean, you don't like Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout and you're tassing it. So maybe that's you guys. But if you do like us and you want more content of us, we'll be there that weekend. So that'll be fun. Darbian will be there, Lack Attack, just a bunch of cool people.
So if you don't want to watch that, though, you could also on September 2nd instead watch the Big 20, which we've talked about so many of those over the course of this podcast. The Big 20 is coming up September 2nd, and it's 20 different games and challenges in games all in a row. It'll be a big marathon with probably dozens and dozens of people participating, and you can find that at twitch.tv/bestofness.
Yeah, you can see a lot of speedrunners practicing for that now. We usually do like a breakdown of the list, but I guess that kind of fell into you moving and some other stuff. But there's some really cool games on that list. Like Journey to Silius is a game I've loved for a long time. It's really cool to see people speedrunning it because Zaki Draghi was like the only one. Games like Panic Restaurant. I don't know. They always do a
Akari
really good job
Warriors
with
is
their
in
list.
this one, I think.
Oh, yeah. Like they always do a good job of like terrible stuff you'd never want to speedrun, and then like hidden gems, and then like really good games.
It does seem like these last two lists have backed off a little bit of that, tennis and that sort of vibe.
Yeah.
Badminton and the sort of games that just aren't fun because they're not really speedruns, they're just awful challenges. I mean, Akari Warriors is probably my best guess, is probably the closest one on this list, but at least that one is more or less a speedrun. So
didn't they do that Spelunker-like game or Super Pitfall? That was bad. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, but that's still at least speedrun territory.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people did enjoy that speedrun, to be fair.
Yeah.
So
those people are crazy. So, and then after that, so we got a pretty busy September coming up. Smash the Record is going to be September 14th to 17th. That'll be on twitch.tv/Smash the Record. Do you want to explain what that is? Because I don't really have a firm grasp on it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's
like
a
Smash Brothers in speedrunning.
It's a Smash Brothers tournament that supports St. Jude Play Live. And they raise a ton of money for it, and they branched out a little bit a few years ago and started including a side stream for speedrunning. So they do invite speedrunners to come and put on an exhibition, and so there's a side stream specifically for speedrunning at Smash the Record. It specifically is geared toward the Melee community, the Smash 4 community, and speedrunning, and it's just one big charity event that combines the three of them. And that's taking place September 14th through 17th. It's located in Ontario, California, but you can watch it.
Very far apart from each other.
Yeah.
You almost just sent a bunch of people just flying to Ontario.
I'm not
Canada,
telling them to go there. I'm just telling them
in the streets. They're like, "Hey, do you know where Smash the Record is?" The Frame Savers podcast told me to come here, and they're just eating poutine, just trying to find it.
I think that if they go there and they get poutine, I think that they're still winning.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the room to complain, really? So the stream specifically for the speedrunning event is on twitch.tv/Smash the Record. If you care about the Smash Brothers stuff, you can find that stream at twitch.tv/VGBootcamp. But Smash the Record stream is the speedrunning side stream. So
Yeah, so consider donating. St. Jude's is a really good cause. So check that out. So what are we going to be doing for our 2 year anniversary? What did we do for our 1 year anniversary first? Let's say that. What did we do?
So for our 1 year anniversary, we talked a little bit about the history of the podcast, and then we
Mm-hmm.
spent basically the rest of the episode as a big 20
Oh
unpacking.
yeah.
It
Okay.
was kind of a good excuse to talk a little bit about ourselves without doing a
Yeah.
whole episode on ourselves. But we've been going for 2 years, and honestly, we are big fans of the Frame Savers. So
Yeah.
I
One of
think
my
we're
favorite
willing to.
podcasts.
I think we're willing to talk about it the whole way this time.
Would you say that we're about to wax poetic about the frame savers, or
Wow, that's deep, John, and I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah?
Yeah,
I don't understand that expression whatsoever. By the way,
I'm ready to wax poetically about
okay.
the Frame Savers.
You have to
If
you or Tina can explain it to me later. The smart people in my life who make me Google words. But yeah, we're gonna talk. Actually, this is something I've honestly considered as a potential idea for an episode. We've discussed for a long time about just talking about so many of these games have changed. You know, a lot of podcasts are kind of news based or something where you if you go back and listen to it, you kind of miss the context. Like a lot of video game podcasts are about, hey, this game's coming out or this happened at E3, and they're hard to go back to. The Frame Savers is a little different in that, like, we're a little bit longer standing. Like you can go back to an episode and enjoy it just as much in 2017 as you can in 2015. But the opposite part of that is that some of these games have significantly changed since we talked about them. New strats have been found, new techs have been found. Stuff that was never thought to be RTA viable from TASes has been implemented. Games have gained a ton of popularity that had almost no communities. So it's really cool to see how that stuff's changed. And we kind of had thought about it when it came to SMB1. Just we did one of our best episodes on SB1 with Darby, and a lot of stuff changed pretty shortly after recording that episode. And it kind of just got me and Chad thinking, like, we should probably just talk about some of these games that we've discussed and what's happened with them since. So I think that's going to be part of the episode. And then we'll probably just, talk to each other and stare longingly into each other's eyes.
like I usually do.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break and listen to some fresh music from something, from some game probably. It'll probably be a video game music song, and then we will talk about games.
I love video games.
Yeah, they're nice. Okay. Do you want to kick this off? Do you want me to kick it off?
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Okay. Because the first four are like all you.
Well, I mean,
Maybe we should have interchanged these a bit. That's fine.
you
Whatever.
can just
Let's
pull
go.
things from the list. We can just go back and forth if you'd like
Okay.
to.
Okay.
I mean, that's what we've done in the past with stuff like
Yeah.
that. Let me timestamp it and then we'll go.
Little inside baseball for you 5 people who watch on YouTube.
Yo, what's up, YouTube?
What's up,
It's
YouTube?
it's your boy Dirty Author Blues.
I was gonna think of a cool like slang name too, but I don't have the hipness to do it. Hip Carls, there we go. Nailed it.
All right. So, let me just start that all over again. Scratch that. Scratch it. Start from the top. So we do want to talk about some of these games that we've done in the past. We tend to go through these games and the episode stands on its own. We've talked about Super Mario World. We talk about Castlevania. We talk about these games. But then we sort of put the game on a shelf. And even if something new happened in the game, we don't really have a segment in the podcast to say, well, here's what's happening in your neck of the woods and talk about, new records that happen. So it's kind of nice to be able to go back and look at some of these games. So I think the first one, we would be remiss if it wasn't top of the list, number one, starting us off with Super Mario Brothers 1. That's probably the one that it's the intro to speedrunning for people who aren't really into speedrunning. There's a few games that really just get people introduced to it. I think Super Mario 64 is that great entry-level game. I think Ocarina of Time is a great entry-level game. And Super Mario Brothers 1 is definitely one that's been highly visible over the past few years. And we were very fortunate in episode 16 to be able to do a live episode on Retro Gaming Live with Darby, and we did a live episode with live Q&A. And at the time, the world record was a 457 and some change. Since that episode, though, not only has the world record been improved to a 456.878 by Darbian, but there's now 456s on the leaderboard, which means there are 4 people now who have beaten Darbian's world record at the time.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. We talked in that episode about the flagpole glitch. Actually, I'm almost positive the flagpole glitch has been something that has been known for a long time, and it was always available in tasks. But it involves so many precise inputs and ridiculous. We overuse this term in the speedrunning community, but frame perfect inputs, just multiple inputs, holding down a button for a certain number of frames, then hitting this, and the setup was just so complex to even. Uh, for somebody to even finally be able to do it on emulator, like not in a run, not anything, but just to actually be able to sit down with save states and execute it, resetting over and over. And now it's to the point where flagpole glitch is, I wouldn't say it's not easy at all, but it's something that happens in runs. It happens. I think it's happened in the warpless runs too, and the warpless world record has gone down by Andrew G. Broke Darbian's time just recently. I don't know if that involved flagpole glitches, but it's just cool because Super Mario Brothers 1 is a game that people have been speedrunning since before speedrunning was really kind of more of a mainstream hobby, and yet still improvements are happening. So much later, and it's really cool to see. And I think honestly one of our best episodes that we did back then, because Darbian's just one of our favorite guests. Cost a lot of money to have him on. We had to pay CNN, I think, just quite a bit of money to peel him away from them. But
I'd say it was money well spent, personally.
yeah, it was great. I mean, but it's cool to see stuff. I think this is kind of just the pinnacle of speedrunning, which is obviously what we talk about all the time, is to see stuff that people say this is impossible to do. And that's what people had said for years and years and years. This is not RTA viable. And I even remember Darbian saying, if somebody ever finds out how to do this RTA, I don't know if I will ever try to do it in a run. Like, it was just so daunting, even to somebody of Darbian's caliber. So that's just kind of the cool thing. Speedrunning pushes you to kind of a limit and pushes people to keep trying and trying to save every frame. So it's really cool to have seen that game improve specifically in my mind. And we have a game that you've run.
Yeah. So
you've run like everything. So I guess that was a game you've run too. You've run probably all of these games.
I've run every game on this list.
All the games.
Is that true? Have I? No, I've never run. I've never run all of the games.
If you had run Barbie Game Girl, I'd be so happy, but you haven't done it. So.
No, I have standards.
Yeah.
So, not actually too long ago, this is a little bit of a more recent episode. So we tried to pick games to talk about. Obviously, when you run a speedrunning podcast that goes on for 2 years, almost all of the games are going to see improvements over that time. It's really hard to completely narrow it down. So we tried to pick games that sort of have a story to be told, something that we can say a little bit about. And one of those games is actually fairly recently. We had in episode 38, we had Evo, Evo: The Search for Eden, which was it's an RPG made by Enix where you take control of a creature and you evolve them through different timelines, eventually trying to, make your way into Eden to live with the goddess Gaia. That was a really awesome, it's a really awesome speedrun. I've done it before. The world record was and is still held by RPG Godfather. And just improving a world record is really not a story on its own. But one of the interesting things about this speedrun is that at the time, the dominant category was always the mammal category. It was the fastest of all the different ways you could play the game. And as of recording this episode right now, the fastest time is currently in Dino, which avoids evolving into a mammal or into a bird. You just stay the same Dino the whole time. Now, I don't actually think that it's believed that Dino is the fastest category. Like, I don't know offhand, but I don't believe,
like in theory, yeah.
I don't believe theoretically Dino maxes out the game, but currently, at the very least, currently Dino is the fastest category, which is kind of an interesting twist, because I think since this game ever saw a speedrun, mammal has always been the preferred and fastest category.
Yeah, and it's just kind of funny to look back on these episodes, like you said, just going through the list. I would say probably 80% of the games have improved world records since we did them. Really more the most recent ones not improving as much, but it is cool to also see a game where the category, there's not specific categories in that you could run with whatever character, right, as you want in Evo.
Yeah.
But obviously you're gonna go with what's theoretically fastest. But RPG Godfather's so so good at this game that he was able to do it with something that other people would think was a handicap almost.
Absolutely.
So that was episode 38. If you want to check it out, SMB1 was 16. If we want to just shout these out so that people can maybe go back and listen. How about SMW? SMW, another Mario game. We got a couple Mario games on this list. Mario is one of the most popular games to speedrun. But SMW hit an elusive goal, just like the 456 was kind of a dream of Super Mario Brothers speedrunning for so long. A 122, an hour and 22 minute, 96 exit time was kind of like a not even a meme, but just a dreamed possibility, but something that didn't seem like it was ever going to truly happen.
Yeah, I
And
think
now
when we
it's
recorded
happened.
the episode, the world record was 123.24. So 122 was still pretty far away.
Yeah, I mean that's like okay, it's possible, but we don't think it's something that's probably going to happen. Let alone 4 times it's happened since then.
Yeah, there's 4 current runners who have 122 times. I think those are Brams, Akisto, Green Death Flavor, and no, not Brams. Truman, Akisto, Green Death Flavor, and Steven
Oh, okay,
are
yep,
four
Steven has it.
different
Yeah.
runners who have, 4 very accomplished Super Mario World speedrunners who have all achieved this huge milestone at this point, which is really amazing.
Yeah, and this game added some new glitches and new tricks that didn't exist, or at least weren't being used in 96 Exit RTA, right? Like the Cookie whatever boss.
Yeah,
What is that? Cookie Mountain.
Cookie Mountain boss kill, Groovy boss kill. Groovy boss kill became more consistent since, and Cookie Mountain boss kill became viable since the
Yeah,
recording of that episode, as well as pretty much all of the categories saw improvements. Actually, worth mentioning is that the 11 exit world record was pretty much improved right after we recorded that episode. Green Death
yeah.
Flavor had the world record at the time with a 946, and probably not. If I had to take a guess, I don't know the exact dates, but if I had to take a guess, I would say it probably wasn't even a month or two after we recorded that episode. Aaron got the world record with a 945
Mhm.
and has basically held it and improved it on his own since then. And
I think
it's
they traded back and forth for a bit
there was
actually
a short
since
period
our
of time where I
episode.
think they traded.
There was quite the battle, and then and that's kind of been Aaron's passion project is to keep that 11 exit world record, and so him and GDF have squared off, and it's cool to see that. Also, the 0 exit, which is basically like the ace or the
Credits warp.
arbitrary code execution, the credits warp, has been improved to a 1 minute 15 second. It was previously a minute and 38 seconds by Panga, so that's a huge. I mean, that's like 30-40% of the time has
Yeah,
been knocked
that
off.
category basically, it's more of a thinking category. It's one of those you come up with a new idea for a way to shave off time, and so every improvement has been mostly like the project of hunting down a new way to run the category. And Furious has held that record now for probably more than a year, I think.
Yeah.
Because he basically on his own comes up with new ideas for improving it even further. So he pushed it from 138 just down, down, down even further.
Yeah, so check out those SMW runners. That episode was episode 14. We also talked about Mario Maker, which was new at the time. So if you want to think about throwbacks to the podcast, Mario Maker had just come out, and so we did like a bonus episode about that. Funny times. What's cool is the influence the podcast has had, and we're gonna kind of just wax poetic later, like I said, but some people have run games that we've talked about just because they heard about the games on the podcast, and 2 of them come to mind. The first one is episode 18, a game that honestly, like, you loved so much that you're just like, we have to do an episode on this. We have to do an episode on this till we finally did. Higamaru Makaijima, the pirate game, the
Yeah.
Japanese pirate game. Jimmy Nintendo, our boy, learned about the game from listening to TFS and improved the world record by about 30 seconds, just with better execution. The game has, if you go back and listen, a ton of screen wraps and stuff, tricks that are difficult to execute. And so Chad had kind of taken it from, you know, theory to execution and routing and made it really good. But Jimmy Nintendo did some grinding and improved that time. So that was one of the first times I remember somebody telling us that they started speedrunning a game just because of the podcast. It's happened a ton of times since then, which is honestly a huge honor and just really cool. The other one is Biomiracle. If you want to talk about that, that's a recent game that's been getting run. That was our first ever episode. You knew our podcast was gonna be special when the first episode you do at all is on Biomiracle Bokute Upa, Baby Mario, And Eon, Enchantress of Numbers, who I think recently started listening to the podcast a few months ago and says she's been binging on it and is almost caught up. I believe she started running that because of this, right?
Yeah,
Because of the podcast.
she mentioned having found it because of the podcast and because of me running it, and she learned it for I don't think it was the last 12-hour challenge, but the one before it. She learned it for the 12-hour challenge, and she was running it since then, trying to submit it to some marathons. And in the process, she found new strats for some stages, just new simple routing changes in order to make it more consistent and more efficient. She did eventually end up beating my time. And between the two of us, we came up with even more consistent strats, new ideas, and stuff like that. And so right now, the world record's in my hands. I don't anticipate that being a forever thing. My run's not perfect either, and I'm looking forward to her. And potentially, I think another runner is learning the game as well. I don't remember her name. But it seems like people are at least starting to take a little bit of notice of Biomiracle. It's a game that I was and am very passionate about. I was very proud of myself at the time for having broken the barrier to be sub 30. So the game was like a 29:57. And Eon like crushed that time. She got like a mid 29, like a 29:30 or something like that. So it was a big improvement. But between the two of us coming up with new strats, I ended up getting a 28 something, even with a death. So I think 27's possible, and I think both me and Eon are actually interested in making that happen eventually.
Yeah, it was cool and kind of nostalgic to see that that game being run by you again, just because that's kind of, well, it was the beginning of the podcast and kind of early in our friendship, and so that was a lot of fun. Hopefully, you continue on that. Speaking on games that people are passionate about for no reason that are weird, I think you guys know that we like to talk about weird games quite a bit, and Barbie Game Girl is an episode that we did in coupled it, I think, with our first ever Bad Games episode, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Something we're known for. We've done 6 or 7 Bad Games episodes because we love those.
That's probably the least on message Bad Games episode we've ever done.
Sense.
Just Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Barbie Game Girl.
Talk about how we've changed. I mean, we can talk about that later. Like, we changed our perspective on things, but like we're like, yeah, let's just throw these games together. Like, now we're like, so how do these games relate to each other? Like, what's the cohesiveness of the message? Now we're just back then we were just like, whatever. So Barbie Game Girl, I had just learned it and like crushed the world record by a minute and a half. Found all kinds of new strats and stuff. I think it was almost 2 minutes. And then I think there were 3 to 4 runners on the speedrun.com leaderboard before we recorded that podcast. There are now 23 run submissions on speedrun.com. And the world record was improved. I improved it to a low 9. Atraz, literally the Game Boy god, the destroyer of worlds, who just takes all the Game Boy world records, got the sub 9 and got an 8:58. A goal of mine to still go back and get that, but it's funny to see a meme game kind of blow up, partly from the podcast, partly from me running it, partly from it being in GDQ, but kind of going from an idea of something I played in the practice room to running it, to making an episode. And now we live in a world where a quarter of 100 people have speedrun Barbie Game Girl.
I'm always disappointed by the Barbie Game Girl speedrunning leaderboard. It's like there's so many games out there that deserve so many runners, and 23 people have run Barbie Game Girl. Like,
and it's not like one of those games like Barney hide and seek or something where it's like so much of a meme that it takes like 5 minutes to learn the game and get a submission. Like, there's been a lot of people who have like legitimately learned this run and submitted. I just approved a run like this week. So, and I had another person telling me they want to make it their first speed game. So,
your first response has to be why?
Yeah, I was like, that's interesting. But I love the game. I want to get world record back. It's one of 2 world records I need to have. And the other one being Alien Syndrome, which was our 3rd episode. So I think one of the fun things about the podcast is just that we've gotten to talk about games that we both really love. Higemaru Makaijima and Evo are 2 to come to mind that we've just talked about that I've always been passionate about and really liked speedrunning. Alien Syndrome was my 3rd ever speedrun and my first ever world record. It's the first game I ever routed on my own. It's the first game I had ever, really been the only one running it and trying to recruit people. And Omega Number came and bopped me, and I bopped him back. But the world record's gone down from a 1352 to a 1317. We found a glitch where we can walk on completely empty space instead of falling, and just optimize some movement and some routing. So it's always cool to just see games that you love get picked up by people and improved.
I mean, there's a lot of games that we've talked about as well that just got a lot of attention from some really talented players before those.
Absolutely.
So you've got like the second episode we did, obviously, we prided ourselves when we did Biomiracle as our first episode that we didn't just hit the low-hanging fruits from the start. It took us 40 something episodes before we finally talked about Super Mario Brothers 2, which in the world of like retro gaming podcasts where you want to talk about a game that has a rich backstory, like Super Mario Brothers 2 is perhaps the lowest hanging fruit you can get.
It's just so easy. It's just like, okay, did you know it used to be Doki Doki Panic? And then
yeah,
I did,
the whole episode basically writes itself. So we were really proud that we started off with some pretty obscure stuff. But our second episode was Castlevania. It was an episode that we've talked before about redoing the episode. We've gotten a lot better before, and now we're like, hey, we could redo some of these episodes. But how about Castlevania?
I would like to note it is our most played episode, I think by far, or it has been for the history of the podcast. And for the life of me, I know it's early on, but like there was a point in time where it had like twice as many plays as like anything else, and we had done like over 30 episodes. So I don't know. I can't imagine it was a good episode compared to anything else. I don't know why it keeps getting listened to, but it was my second ever speed game, and a lot has changed in it. A lot of cool things actually have been found.
Yeah, I think the big story for Castlevania, if you don't want to talk about tech, which I'm sure John will mention some of the new tech for the game, but the big story for Castlevania is that since the episode was recorded, over time, different people have come and have tried to topple the king, have tried to come and take down K-Mac. And you had someone like Double Armory come along. Double Armory took the world record from K-Mac, and K-Mac dragged himself out of retirement and got the world record back by a pretty wide margin. And then after that, I don't remember the guy's name. Do you remember it offhand?
I don't. I can try and find it while you.
So he came along and basically reproduced everything K-Mac had done, but had found a way to improve his odds of getting the stopwatch toward the beginning of the game. And there's a glitch you can do with it that saves a few seconds in the first stage. And so he ended up beating K-Mac by a very small margin. It was like tenths of a second he beat K-Mac by using the stopwatch in the first stage. And K-Mac came back and decided that he would just improve the world record by like 5 seconds. So
yeah, and that was the big one. Is the well, I just pulled up Castlevania DOS. Let's not talk about Castlevania DOS. I didn't even know that was a thing, but not surprising. The stopwatch glitch was another one of those, strats that I think we might have mentioned in the episode as being like, well, this has never been done, and it's like basically like less than 1% chance, and then nobody's going to put this in a run.
Yeah, the big problem was that not just was it difficult to execute, but also the odds of actually getting a stopwatch in the first room.
Less than 1% or something. It's
right, but they figured out how to kill enemies in the right way, and figured out that the randomness for getting the drop was actually based more on like what frame you kill the enemy. So they sort of timed it out. Swing your whip at exactly the right time, and you get the drop. So it wasn't RNG anymore at that point. It wasn't randomness you were depending on. It became a frame perfect trick at that point. So
yeah, ahead of Double Armory now is Chidu, Baze, Furious Paul, Janth, and then K-Mac. So a lot of different people.
Janth was the one. Janth was the one who put into practice the principle of actually making the stopwatch drop consistent. And we're probably looking at happening a third time, with Furious Paul coming along. Furious Paul has been on a tear trying to improve his time in Castlevania 1. He is actively working out right now. That is not an old leaderboard entry by any means. He is working hard. So we may see, Act 3 of someone tries to topple the giant.
Yeah, I mean, we might just need to do another episode on this, because you even look at the times. It's like 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 days ago was Furious Ball, 10 months ago, 3 months ago. So this game has had kind of a renaissance. Another kind of just funny note about Castlevania episode, besides the fact that it's one of our most popular episodes, is that, which I kind of just need to go back and listen to it at this point to hear what like thousands of, like, it's gotten so many plays. I'm like, oh gosh, what do we even say? I don't know. But back then, like just the whole speedrunning landscape has changed so much. I remember I had a 13:33, which now is 2 minutes off world record and is like 40 something place. But at the time, that was actually a pretty good time. This was like early 2014, and I thought I was like third or fourth. I had like I only knew of a few people who had better runs than me, and the only reason I mention this is that like speedrun.com didn't even exist back then. There was really no unified place to even find like where all these other runners were doing stuff like that. And that's not a knock on SDA, of course. That was never the intent of SDA. But it's also really helped progress some of these games because you can pull up all these other people's runs and see what's changed and what people are doing. You know, I can pull up literally 102 runs of Castlevania on this site right here and look at the different strats used and stuff like that. So it's just interesting to see how much stuff has changed since early 2015 or whenever we started the podcast, late 2015.
Do you want to touch a little bit about some of the new tricks that were found? I think Castlevania is at least easily understood enough to be worthwhile. Just mention a few things.
The only one that I know outside of the stopwatch glitch, which I don't know a ton about, is that there's a instant kill bat crit. The first boss you kill with axes, but if you can hit the bat while it overlaps with one of the candles, it just kind of does multiple hits. You know, a hit per frame or whatever it does, it kills it in one axe essentially.
Well, the overlapping the candle was the old method of doing it using the axe. You could get 2 hits on it with 1 axe using the candle. But the new method is actually doing a proper crit. So you stand at the top of the stairs and you hit it with the whip at the same time it hits you, and it's basically the same as a drak crit. It does the full damage of it does its full life bar in damage, which is crazy. But it's like a very small frame window. I don't think it's frame perfect, but it's like a 2 frame window or something like that.
Those crits are really hard in that game because you have to take damage the same time you're dealing it. And the Drak ones especially are really hard. But a lot of people I think ran this at Big 20. Was this a Big 20 game?
Yeah, I think it was Big 20 number 3 or 2.
So another example of just a game that grew a lot once once a lot of these higher end runners started at least playing around with it. So you actually know more about the tech of the game than I do. So
I ran it as well.
Yeah, I remember that. Cool speed game, and one that maybe we need to revisit at some point, or just the series in general. We never talked about 4. We've never talked about 3. We never talked about 2.
Dracula X.
We've never talked about Dracula X. We never talked about Castlevania 64.
So 2 episodes that we did back to back. One of the things that I noticed when reviewing our 1-year anniversary was we were talking about what are our plans with the podcast going forward. And one of the things that we said was that we wanted to step outside of our comfort zone and do some RPGs. And we did do that. We ended up achieving that goal. And so we had 1 month where we did 2 RPG episodes. We did Super Mario RPG and we did Final Fantasy VII. And both of those, I think, were excellent episodes. I think people really enjoyed seeing those. So to start with Super Mario RPG, at the time, there were 2 runners who were dominant in the game. There was Millennium and there was Lack Attack, who were both going back and forth with the record. I don't know who had it at the time of recording that episode, but over the course of time, they both managed.
Lack had it.
I think so. I think so. They both managed to achieve their goals of cutting the 2:49, and they were both pretty happy with their times. I think the competition died down a little bit after they cut the 2:50 mark and got 2:49s. But just over time, the game sat around, and Albrecht put in the time and ended up gaining a world record of 2:49.13, which is a significant improvement over the existing world records, and actually is a fairly sizable gap between him and second place now, second and third place being relatively close. And I think that that's really interesting. This is a game that, this game has actually seen a lot of rerouting over time. Since I've been a speedrunner, this game has been rerouted quite a few times, making use of lots of different glitches in order to improve the time, and just runners have gotten better over time as well. The old world records, you could drop super jumps a few times and it wasn't a big deal. Now you want to get world record, dropping super jumps is a huge impediment. And so the world record being improved to where it is right now, is 2:48 possible? Probably. I mean, you look at even the world records of this game now, they usually lose decent chunks of time. It's not like golds across the board like you see with some games. This is just a really temperamental game, and it's really easy to lose time that's more or less out of your hands. So I hope to see more of this game coming up in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're normally pretty conservative when we talk about speedrunning and the potential for it in the future because we don't want to sound stupid. But like, who's to say games like this like can't be 2 minutes faster in a couple of years? Look, you look back 2 years, 2 years ago, and it's like a 12 flat in Castlevania was like world record or like a 158. Now it's like what 20 seconds faster or 15 seconds faster. I mean, these games can just get pushed so far down. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a 121 in Super Mario World. We don't know. Maybe something crazy will get found. We have no idea. So another game that's improved. We talked about this at the top of the episode. Is Final Fantasy VII. My favorite speed game, my favorite video game, and a couple of routing changes have been added. I think they skip Aqualung. I'm pretty sure they didn't do that back then. They found a skip recently, and then by recently I mean like within the last month or two. I'm pretty sure to skip a cutscene before Wall Market saves like 90 seconds or a minute or so in Midgar in the beginning of the game. It's like a 50-50 chance of getting it because it alternates frames, whatever's happening with the encounter or whatever. So basically, like, there's no way to know. Like, you have 50% chance of doing it if you execute properly. And the world record when we did that episode was Ajneb 174 at a 7:37:34. Since then, two people have beaten that. Luz Belhim as a 7:34:46 and Carnage 64 just recently, like a week ago, got a 7:36:18. Some of that is actually just really due to mashing, which is kind of funny. Lose Bell's mashing on text is really good. And having played that game, like I cannot imagine actually like focusing on the mashing because your max. I mean, you can't mash for 8 hours straight, right? It just turbo's not allowed. Japanese runners allow it, but the U.S. leaderboard or whatever, no turbo, and that's a big reason for the difference. But just new skips being found, new routing still being found to push that down, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that game keeps improving with just crazy dramatic strats. But 8 hour game, pretty intense. But 3 minute improvement.
So what about another game that's been improved by a beast of a titan of a speedrunner? How about Mega Man?
Yeah. Oh, just so people know if they want to go back, Final Fantasy VII was episodes 28 and 29, and SMRPG was 27. So if you want to go back to that RPG block, that was kind of a daunting task for us as people who had at the time neither of us had ever run a speed game, an RPG. I'm pretty sure, and not something that we were as familiar with. Mega Man episode 10, we had Dexter on, one of our most handsome guests, and the all stages category is kind of the main category for that. Cool Kid has been improving his record constantly. Like he's bopped himself like 2 or 3 times in the last few months even, and he is now 26 seconds ahead of second place. So he has an 18:24, and Andy Sui, who is no scrub, obviously, has an 18:50, and is tied with someone else. White hats behind. I mean, we're talking about like he is worlds ahead of like some amazing speedrunners, and so it's cool seeing that. I mean, that game is a very difficult speed game, and that was episode 10 if you want to go back and listen to that. And then just to wrap up, just a couple of quick ones, I guess. Bebe's Kids, Pocket 18 recently. I mentioned this, but I beat the task and beat my time and world record since doing that Pocket. I'm sad I didn't get to announce that in the Pocket. I meant to go back and do a disclaimer, but I got 9:45. And TMNT 3 Radical Rescue, another Pocket. Zorlax beat the 100% world record or the whatever category he was doing at SGDQ after the episode. So we did an episode and we made it happen. We made that world record.
We did
happen.
It, guys. Everyone, give yourselves a pat on the back.
And I guess just lastly, do you want to talk about Avenging Spirit, a game we've both run that you talked me into?
Yeah, so
rapid fire section here.
That game was a pretty fast speed run. I think a lot of us picked it up all at the same time, and we're working pretty hard on it. But one of the big impediments was the randomness from some of the bosses, and Nadua actually figured out how to manipulate the RNG by figuring out what frame to start the game on. You can use an audio cue to listen to the song at the beginning of the game, and you hit start on the right frame, and all of the bosses just magically play nice. So that's really nice. Jeff Rosledger, an incredibly talented speedrunner who has played so many games and plays them at a incredible level. He has the world record now. He jumped on this train when this game was at its height of popularity. Nadua is in second place. Honestly, fairly deserved considering he's the one who found the RNG manipulation. There's a lot of great speedrunners behind him in line. I think at this point now I'm probably like ninth or something when
Yeah,
I had the world
third.
record at one point.
I'm third in both, but Nadua's too strong. Nadua, and I can't grind that game out. But question for you, did your boy John Carl's podcast co-host get that frame perfect start at
My boy
GDQ?
got it. He got it at SGDQ.
And I got a PB because of it.
He nailed it. He killed it.
That was exciting. That was fun. Nothing better.
Not just that, but good ending.
Like that's a life goal to like have a leaderboard time that's from GDQ, and like now we both have it. We both have it, and there's no way I'm going back to that category. I don't care if it's third. I'm not going to improve that.
I said the same thing about Rocky and Bullwinkle. If that's going to be where the world record is, if it's going to be a GDQ VOD, that game's dead to me. Yeah, someone else can come and beat the time by twice as much. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, and these are just the ones that we kind of thought were interesting. I mean, there's plenty of others. I think the Little Nemo record improved. Dragon, what is it? Gargoyle's Quest, just almost everything we've talked about has improved since we
Yeah, it's hard to look at this list and name a game that hasn't seen at least some improvement. I mean, there's a few on here probably hasn't seen very much. I mean, I think you might. Did you end up getting the world record in James Bond 007?
No,
it stayed exactly where it was.
I improved my time, but I just I found strats that would improve it, but I just can't. I can't get myself to continue playing it.
I'm honestly just trying to look at this list.
Mega Man 2 still has the same world record. I'm trying to think. There's a number of them, but it's
Cryon's Conquest I think episodes. Stayed put.
Yeah, Bad Breaks has a really good time in that, but they're pretty few and far between, to be honest. I mean, unless you want to talk about something like Donkey Kong Country, which we did 2 weeks ago, obviously. Right. But even The Little Mermaid probably has improved since we did it, and that was like a month ago. I don't know if it has, but probably has. Who knows?
I think it did.
No, Dugong took it before that episode or after. I don't remember. So
it's definitely after.
The good thing is that I think most of the strats and most of everything we talk about in every episode is still pretty relevant, because it's kind of funny. People have talked about binging our episode. That's the culture we live in, the Netflix culture we live in. People are like, I've been binging the frame savers. So like the stuff's not going to be out of date, it's still going to be entertaining to you. But, the world record listings won't be up to date,
Definitely.
It is nice knowing that people can go back and listen to, if we were doing just current news, people couldn't even go back 2 months ago and listen to an episode. They wouldn't care. So it's good to know that we have episodes that can just keep once they start getting to millions of plays, we can retire. We're done.
Yeah, and just live off of the residuals
stuff. Oh man, cannot wait. So any other thoughts on games that improved?
No, I'm excited to have been a part of a podcast that was able to talk about, I mean, just the games that we talked about just now are pretty amazing, but to consider the fact that this is only, 10% of our entire list, it's amazing to look back at everything that we've done.
Yeah, and I want to just say as a final thought, I think this should be a lesson, if any, of nobody's ever killed a world record. A run's never dead. People are like, oh, well, I killed the world record. No one's ever beating it. It's not gonna happen. Somebody can always. The only time that's gonna happen is if nobody cares about your game enough to just not run it. But all of these games can continue to get improved. You rent world records. You don't own them. So stop being condescending. That I think that's one of the coolest things about our hobby is that it's just like it's ever being pushed. Like people just push themselves to such a limit to just. I mean, I think Super Mario Brothers 1 is the key example, just to the frames. So,
thanks, Uncle John.
Yeah, that's my angry man on the porch thing. So, let's go ahead and take a quick break so I can stop rambling, and then we can just do some more rambling. You want me to kick this off? Do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, you can kick it off. It's fine.
Okay. So I'm really excited to have been able to do this podcast for 2 years. It's really cool to see a concept go from something in your mind to something that you actually go out and execute and do. And then on top of that, something that other people enjoy and like and get excited about, and that's just really cool to see that growth from an idea to execution, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun, and I think one of the things I'm most proud of is just the consistency we've had. This is episode 50, and so we should have had 52 episodes. So we've missed 2 episodes in 2 years, basically, and half of that is that we bumped this back to land on the actual 2 year. So really, we missed like an episode and a half, like a week and a half behind schedule, 2 years in, and that's really awesome to me. A lot of podcasts miss a week. They miss, they'll go 2 or 3 week gaps without doing something, and then they'll do spurts. And I've really enjoyed it. I have a great co-host. So what do you want to talk about? Wax poetic for me.
I think one of the things is when we started this podcast, at first, I mean, we talked about this during the 1 year anniversary. We probably talked about this during the first few episodes, but when we started this podcast, you came to me with the idea, and I said, I'm interested in just seeing where it goes and just, sticking around until it's not fun anymore, right? Yeah. And since we started, I've only become more interested and more engaged in the project. I've loved doing this podcast. I think the thing that makes it so surreal for me is that when we started the podcast, we just really desperately wanted other people to know about it. We wanted to be able to say to people, we made this thing, we're really proud of it, try it out. And now we're kind of at that point where the snowball has picked up all of its momentum on its own and it's going. And, now we stream and we see people we've never seen before come into our stream and say, hey, I heard about you from the Frame Savers. I just got done listening to a bunch of episodes. I love it. And I told John the other day I was streaming and it had to have been like 5 or 6 people. They weren't affiliated with each other, but just over the course of one stream, 5 or 6 people came in and said, heard about you from the Frame Savers. Really enjoy it. Thanks for making it. And that's just, it's mind blowing to me because I'm still just some idiot on the internet doing a co-host with some other idiot on the internet. And the fact that there's people out there who really enjoy it is crazy to me.
Absolutely. I mean, that's been fun. It's gone to the point of like, can we even get people to be on this podcast? To just like, if I'm at a GDQ 50 times, somebody comes up to me and they're like, when are you going to do the episode on Dora the Explorer for GameCube? Or when do you, like just with ridiculous requests or like, hey, if you ever want to do this episode, I'll come on. Like we have people approaching us. It's super flattering. I mean, when we started out doing this, we were getting, a pretty good amount of plays in my mind.
Yeah, a decent number,
we were
getting, in the hundreds.
Couple hundred plays a month. And I think a lot of that had to do with Chad having a decent, community in his channel. My stream was literally below 200 followers at that point. But now, like last month, every month is basically our best month that we've ever had. But last month we hit over 8,000 plays just last month. And so that's just awesome to see. We passed 50,000 plays all time, and who knows where it'll go. Hopefully it'll just keep snowballing and growing, but it's really cool. I think beyond the numbers, because it's not like we get paid per play or we're like making we really I think literally we've taken $0 from this podcast, both me and Chad. I really, maybe we've bought a game that we need to play or something like.
No, we've multiple times been like, well, I need such and such thing. I needed to replace a microphone at one point, and John said, well, do you want to take it out of the Frame Savers money? And at no point have either of us really ever taken any money out. We've compensated ourselves, or John's compensated himself for hosting fees. We've paid our producer what we can afford to pay for, but for the most part, like, we don't get anything out of doing this, just a love of being able to share the info.
We got to put that money towards getting T-shirts, getting business cards, stuff like that, and paying for some ads to grow. Like the CU podcast had us as a sponsor, and that was a really awesome experience and helped us grow. Also, shout outs to our boys at Warp World Podcast. They gave us a huge bump when they talked about us. So, but a lot of you guys just spreading the word with each other. We have an active Discord now. We have T-shirts. We have people wearing T-shirts at events. We have, it's just funny to see how it grows from like, hey, I'm somebody who likes listening to podcasts and they don't talk about speedrunning, and like, let me ask this guy Chad, who's basically my favorite streamer, if he wants to do it with me. And then Chad going from the point of like, maybe I'll just try it out for a bit, and then here we are 2 years later. I never thought Brian would help us for 2 years and be so generous. Like, just kind of a shock. And so it's been fun. What are your favorite parts about doing the podcast that I guess makes you feel like it stands out from other content that's out there.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this idea about how we both sometimes feel like the odd man out, in the sense that there's a lot of podcasts out there that have this sort of really free form format. And
Hmm.
it's really no knock against it. It's an incredibly popular format, and I think for a lot of people it works really well. But me and John both are a lot more devoted to the idea of being able to share information in a more I don't want to use a term.
Educational way?
Yeah, I don't want to use a term that sounds like we're trying to be snooty or anything like that. I think it's
No.
just like we approach the content in a lot more of like an academic way, I think.
Yeah. Or like a
And
preservationist way almost too.
yeah,
Like we've documented these it's similar to me in terms of like Game Boy Quest is something I'm really passionate about, and one of the things I like about it is that I am recording and highlighting every game I beat and uploading it, and plenty of them have no content online. A lot of this information we're talking about, like the speed run strats and content and history for some of these games, aren't documented other places. And I mean, something like Donkey Kong Country, sure, you can go find a million things about that, but where are you going to find information about Alien Syndrome or Biomiracle or a bunch of these different games we've talked about? It's really cool to kind of contribute that to the world, and that's always there. There's always going to be some information about that.
yeah, and I don't think we really view ourselves as. I mean, I don't think we take ourselves so seriously or view
No,
ourselves in such a lofty light that we believe ourselves to be, true historians and
no,
craftsmen in that
absolutely
sense.
not.
But I think there's a real difference between the type of content that me and John are interested in listening to, and that informs the sort of content that we enjoy producing. And so we very much enjoy this idea of, taking a game and talking about its history and talking about what kind of strats there are and talking about
Hmm.
the state of the speedrunning scene at the time, who's playing it, what are their times, talking about, our opinions about the game. And I think it's the sort of content that it has morphed over time. I mean, if you look at our earliest episodes, there's a lot of features to the way we presented the information that has changed dramatically, based compared to like modern episodes.
Yeah,
But I think our aim has always stayed the same, and I think our passion for sort of putting that information together in a digestible way, um,
definitely.
has really just. I think it's improved. I think we've gotten better. Is what I want to say.
Yeah, and I'd say I think that's one of the big positives of both the podcast and Your Mind streams, is that just like we do have a passion for video games in general, not like specific video games. And so a lot of the games we talk about, you're just never going to hear anybody else talk about, and that's something that I really like about the podcast, because that's the kind of content I wish I could go on. And that sounds really pretentious to be like, I wish I could listen to our podcast, but it's like, I wish I could download a podcast episode of like random obscure games that I'm never going to hear about from like a big podcast like Retronauts or Watch Out for Fireballs. Like I'm not going to hear them talk about Wanda Gamelon probably ever. I'm not going to hear them talk about like obscure Game Boy games, and so it's really cool to do that. The other thing I'd say, good question to ask, and I was going to ask it, and then you kind of alluded to it, is like how has stuff changed since we started? I think one thing that we've done is, one, this podcast couldn't exist if it was just one of us. I think we do push each other. There's so many times where one of us just is not feeling it, or the other one's not feeling it, or we get a little arguments with each other, getting annoyed at each other for like pushing each other along when we're like, we need to get stuff done. But I think we took a real concerted effort this past year versus the first year to put more time into the research and to step up our game. I think we had a talk probably like 8-10 months ago where we were just like, I think we could do a lot better job. We got to the point where we were comfortable talking about games, and we realized that we were coasting on that, and we wanted to put extra effort into research and finding, historical details and asking the speedrunners questions and reaching out to people, just kind of doing more due diligence. I mean, we'll never be a gaming historian. We're never going to be, what gaming or any of that stuff that you find on YouTube. Like those are definitely best places to go for that. But we still wanted to be more informed, I guess. And I think that's been our goal the last year, along with stretching ourselves on the kind of games we do. And I think we've done a really good job of both of those.
I think that desire to be like that though is what pushes us. I think wanting to be able to be proud of our content. You know, you look at content
Definitely.
from the gaming historian and you say, "Wow, that is really well articulated. It's really well formatted. It's a clear narrative. There's a point. There's a reason why I'm listening to this." And I think even if we accept and appreciate that that's really just not what we're doing and that's not what we're going to achieve, I think desiring that and understanding that that's the lofty goal we shoot for, I think helps us produce content that we're really proud of. You know, we
Yeah.
joke about it sometimes. We talk about really old episodes, you know, talking about Castlevania and saying, well, you know, it's our most listened to episode, but it's episode number 2, so it's not any good. But I
Yeah.
think that there's a hint of truth to that. You know, we've gotten
Yeah.
better. We've gotten to the point now where we know how to make the sort of content that we're really proud of. You know,
Yeah.
I not too long ago, probably about 2 or 3 months ago, went back and listened to some of the early episodes just for nostalgia's sake, just to listen to
Mhm.
myself do the first few episodes of the podcast. And that's not content that I'm super proud of. I joke
Yeah.
around with people who come and they say, "Hey, I just started listening to the Frame
Me
Savers." And
too.
I say, "Which end did you start from?" Because there's a big difference to me from starting from recent and going
Yeah.
backward to starting from the
I've
beginning.
I've even had listeners come to me and say, "I went back and listened to some old episodes, and wow, you guys have gotten a lot better," which is a nice way of saying you guys used to be pretty bad, and now you're like pretty decent.
But I accept
Um,
that. You know, we had
yeah,
to make the bad
absolutely. I'm proud of that.
episodes to
I'm proud of it.
get to where we are now, you know?
I'll say, I mean, and even in the past year, there's been episodes that both of us have probably not felt great about. But I'll say like a big reason why you may have noticed and I always get mushy with Chad, and it's the worst. But one of the big reasons why the content's been so much better the last year is that Chad usually does the notes more often than I do, and he's been really the one driving a lot of this research and a lot of improving the content, and it's just something that he's naturally better at than I am, like organizing the thoughts and notes. And it has been a concerted effort. It takes more time. We could just easily coast a lot. Like it'd be very easy to coast this format and just like not put that time in. But like, that's the Donkey Kong Country episode, like we just did. Like I really tried to put a ton of research. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. We've been trying to be proactive into making this something we're proud of, and I think we've accomplished that. And I'm really happy with the way it's going.
I mean, I can name
Um,
offhand in recent history episodes we've had that are some of the ones that I'm most proud of. You know, even though I wasn't even a part of it, I told John listening to it, like my jokes about, oh, Spike should just replace me. That was probably one of the best TFS episodes I've ever
yeah, it
listened
was
to.
really good.
And I've started listening. I mean, you know, there was a time at the beginning of the podcast when it was a little rough around the edges. I didn't listen to him very often. I listen to every episode now, so I know which ones are good and which ones are bad. I even listen to my pockets, and I cringe my
Yep,
way through the whole thing listening to my own voice.
that's a
Um,
tough one.
but Donkey Kong Country, Dragon Warrior, those sorts of episodes are the sort of episodes that we want to do.
Yeah,
And we
definitely.
want to be able to push it to that point. We want to be able to get an episode that we're just super proud of, because I mean, I thought the Super Mario Brothers 2 episode was fantastic. I
Yeah,
thought it was just
absolutely.
well organized. You know, the thoughts were very clear and on point.
Yeah, and that's sometimes why, I mean, again, we've been really consistent, but sometimes we'll do two pockets in a row and then do an episode or whatever. It's like we are trying to do a higher level, and sometimes it's exhausting, or sometimes we realize like if we do this today, we're not going to do the job that we want to do. Let's make sure that we take the time on it. So, I have a question from Tina Hacks. We can dive into some Q&A because this was going to be kind of the next question I asked you. Any plans you hope to achieve with TFS before you hit year number 3? So that's what I was going to say is do we have any goals going forward? We haven't discussed this. We have no like pre-planned answers for this, but I know last year we said, hey, let's do some RPGs. Let's stress ourselves. We're just doing NES platformers so often. What are you thinking for year 3, season 3 of the Frame Savers?
Well, I think my answer is similar to our 1 year anniversary. I think we do owe people and we owe ourselves the opportunity to get out of our comfort zone more often.
Absolutely.
I think that we both tend to lean pretty heavily on the fact that, you know, John more so than most speedrunners, and me even more so, we both run a giant library of games. And so it's
Yeah,
so easy to just grab something off the shelf and say, well, I've played this game, we can talk about it for an hour or whatever. But
definitely.
I think that we owe it to, I mean, why do you think we haven't done an episode on Super Mario 64? Why have we not done an episode on Ocarina of Time? Why have we not done an episode on Mike Tyson's Punch Out? I mean, there are games with fantastic and rich speedrun backgrounds and histories, and it's just not in our comfort zone. It's just
Yeah.
not what we know. And those
Or
would
we
be
don't
great.
know how we don't know the plan to articulate it
Hmm.
too. Like Mike Tyson's Punch Out's one of my favorite episodes, but I don't exactly know how I could articulate it for an hour and a half and make it the quality I'd want it to be. So I think also another thing is we probably need to stretch out and do other consoles more often. We've done literally no Genesis games in 2 years, no Sega games whatsoever. We haven't done anything like Game Gear, Sega CD, a lot of disc-based systems. And we do mostly retro content. I mean, outside of Azure Striker Gunvolt 2, almost everything's been retro, and that's kind of retro inspired. But there is a lot of stuff in that 32-bit era, 64-bit era that we have just not touched. We've done. Have we done a Nintendo 64 game?
Yeah, Bomberman 64, I believe.
Bomberman. That's the only one though. I'm pretty sure.
We had a half and half episode with Star Fox 64 as
Oh,
well.
and
Obviously,
Superman
I mean,
64,
I
Superman
mean,
64.
it's
Yeah, but
obviously sparse, but we
there's
talk about
stuff we
what we
could do.
know.
Yeah, there's stuff that we could take the time, and it's hard because we both have so many projects. We want to speedrun the games we want to speedrun. I have Game Boy Quest. We have all kinds of stuff. Um, that's the hardest thing in the podcast is like when Chad gives me a game or I give him a game and he's like, we've never played it and we have to take some of our precious stream time to play it. So like to put in some Genesis game neither of us have ever played, that'd be a stretch. So I'd like to make a goal to do some Sega games and to do some other systems. Maybe even some other genres that we haven't done. I mean, we've mostly done platformers and RPGs and action games, but we've never done like a shooter. We've never done like a shmup. There's territory we could still cover, and that's the cool thing about the podcast is there's unlimited content. If you do a news-based podcast, it could be a slow news week and just no games have been released and there's nothing interesting to talk about. We have a whole history of literally hundreds of thousands of games that we could pick from. So
I will say, as far as in terms of going forward, rather than looking back at the mistakes we've made, but our ability to go forward and correct them, I think now we have sort of established ourselves. Our podcast is, even if people don't know it, they can look at it and see that it's something that's actually meaningful. Back when we were getting 300 plays a month, that's very different than now being able to say, we have 8,000 plays a month and we have all of these people listening and an active community who care about the podcast. It helps us be able to attract the sort of interest from other people to be able to contribute to make the podcast the best it can be. The Dragon Warrior episode wouldn't have been 1% as good as it was if it hadn't been for Ness Cardinality making it what it was. He was the driving force for making that episode amazing. And likewise, you look at a lot of these games, we now stand in a position where we could attract the sort of people who would be willing to say, yeah, I want to talk about this game. I want to make it amazing. Would Summoning Salt be willing to come on and talk about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out? Would, any one of the various top SM64 players be willing to come on and talk about SM64? Maybe at this point.
I think one of the things you've noticed is the past year we've relied a lot more on guests, and that's because even though both of us speedrun a lot of games, and by that I mean you still speedrun 5 times as many games as me, like mathematically speaking. I love your. Well, what are you gonna say?
It's accurate.
At a certain point, you exhaust your own resources of content that overlaps between interesting and substantive enough for a podcast and that you have enough expertise on. And so we've had to rely a lot on people coming in. Whenever we hit the $150 on Patreon, we're both going to need help on Super Metroid. We would need so much help on Super Mario. And more as we go along, a lot of the episodes are going to need guests just because, we can only have so much expertise and with that raised bar of quality, it's tough to speak to those games in the depth they deserve. So the past year we couldn't have done any of it without our guests for sure. Just recently, obviously you said Spike Vegeta just killed it. Ness Carnality, that was an amazing episode. I don't want to even leave anybody out and start going on lists, but we have great guests and they just really help make out. That's how we were able to do RPGs when they started the year.
Seven Sins and Lack Attack.
We needed people to come in and say, hey, tell us how it is to speedrun an RPG, and I think that's really fun. And it's more than, I think the other thing we both would agree we pride ourselves on is it's not like, hey, we're just going to interview this speedrunner. These people come on and they're co-hosts and they bring their passion for their games to the podcast rather than let me just not that there's anything wrong with just interviewing a speedrunner. I'm going to be interviewed later, so I don't mean that as a negative, but it's they're contributing to the quality of the episode so much. They're helping us with notes. They're helping. We're leaning on them heavily. to make the content good. So
Definitely.
Squally Pillow asks us, also, I appreciate the family-friendly language on TFS as I sometimes listen to them with my kids around. Was this a conscientious decision or something that came naturally? I don't know if we've discussed this on the podcast or if we've said it mentioning it is kind of conscientious. That's a really hard word. Why don't you say it?
Conscientious.
You're so smart. Um,
Thanks.
the bar's low, huh?
Yeah.
That's one of those things that, like, I think when we were early on, I listened to a lot of podcasts that were family friendly, and we were thinking about exploring partnering with them, and so it just kind of was something we made in passing. And once we pretty early on realized we weren't going to do that, Chad was basically the proponent of saying, well, I kind of like that we're family friendly. Not to an extreme amount. I know we've said some swear words on the podcast, a very small amount, but we have. And I'm sure we've made jokes that are not completely kid friendly, but for the most part, it's just been, it's really easy just to lean on language for comedy, like swear words and stuff for comedy and for emphasis and be lazy, but also just knowing our families could listen, my nieces could listen, people listen with their kids. It has kind of been intentional, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had times before where, we had a guest on or something like that. We mentioned to them, we try to be more family friendly, and me and John have had the conversation later. Do we still need to do that? But it's just nice. It's nice knowing that families can listen. And you're absolutely right. It's something that I've never given any thought to, but just swearing for comedy it's so easy to lean on. I mean, I definitely do it all the time on my personal stream. I'm definitely not family friendly on my personal stream, but like it's cheap humor. It's just cheap getting a laugh for you in a moment. But I like the fact that our content is family friendly, and I don't think that we're producing the sort of content where we really need to appeal to the edgy teen demographic.
Yeah. And our banter's charming enough. We don't need those cuss words.
I will say that I'm getting better. After listening to the Spike Vegeta episode, I realized that his improv training's really good, because I tend to throw you off a lot when you make a joke. I tend to
you just realizing this?
Well, no, I mean,
Wow.
I knew that I did it, but I didn't understand how frustrating it probably was, because you'd make jokes and I would be like,
You do not back up those jokes. You do
but
not.
like the flow is so much better when it's just every response is yes and you build off of it. And I think that a lot of that comes from Spike's improv training, and I'm realizing I could probably do better about that. I could probably do a lot better to help the flow of this podcast.
Thank you so much, Spike. I owe you a country ham. That's going to be a game changer, I hope.
Is a country ham a typical gift with your people?
I don't think like that with my people. I feel like just sometimes I'm on the basketball court and I'm passing you the ball, not to make a sports analogy, and you refuse to look at the ball, and then you just look at me like, what are you thinking? And it's just like, I was just hoping you catch the ball and then, like, pass it back. Or it's just, sometimes it's tough. I mean, you're a lot taller than me. Maybe you couldn't see that
I didn't see the ball.
Yeah. So JP Nance kind of asked a question that we just already answered, but how has the show changed from what you thought it would be at the beginning? One thing I'd just like to follow up with from what we discussed before, if you listened to my pocket like a week ago, I think when I initially pitched the idea to Chad, I thought that we'd talk about collecting a lot. I think I might have pitched it as being like half speedrunning, half collecting. I don't know if you remember that, like in the very early stages. And I kind of discussed on that pocket why that's not the case. But I think we definitely had different ideas for what the podcast might be. And we've kind of talked a bunch about how it's changed since then. But that's just one thing that stands out.
It's super cliche to say, but I think to a certain extent the Frame Savers organically became what it is. We had an idea what it was at the beginning. We had an idea it was going to be speedrunning, retro gaming, and collecting, and talking about all these things. But I think over time we started hearing parts of the podcast that we didn't like and hearing the parts that we did like, and we started emphasizing the parts we liked more, and it's sort of become what it is today. And I think it was done in a really organic way. And to once again be incredibly cliche, I just think it's sort of the Frame Savers grew on its own. We just sort of went along with it.
Definitely. I think that's a good point. And The other thing with that is I've always listened to a lot of podcasts, and so I hear things I like and don't like in those podcasts. And I think you've started listening to a few more since, because you weren't even a podcast listener when you started this. I mean, you
No.
just, which is funny that I asked you to do a podcast with me, because it's like, well, you don't really even enjoy the medium yourself per se. But I
And
think once
now I
more
listen
of
to
them,
podcasts in my car more than I listen to music.
yeah, me too. That's all I listen to. But you hear things like, you might listen to like, oh, somebody's doing a retro game podcast and it seems like they're covering some games I might like, and you're just like, I can't listen to these people. They can't stay on topic. They're rambly. They're whatever. And you kind of learn from those things. So that's helped a lot.
I will
You
say
like?
that I will
Go
say
ahead.
that there's a lot of other speedrunning podcasts that have come and gone over time. I think when we started the podcast, the Sunday Sequence Break might have still been active, or at least may have
Oh,
just
it
wrapped
definitely
up.
was. Oh, it
And
definitely was.
the other TFS, the final split, was going during the time that we record the podcast. There's a handful of mostly video-based podcasts that take place on Twitch. Just trying to think of some of them. There's Speedrunning Anonymous, Real Time Chatting. Just there's a bunch of podcasts that are on the subject of speedrunning. And then there's this new one that you mentioned that is interviewing you. And I think it's interesting that we've sort of firmly established ourselves in the niche that we are right now, in the sort of like one game per episode sort of encyclopedic approach to speedrunning, whereas all these other podcasts have sort of skirted around us in sort of either the news or the personality based podcasts, which I
Yeah.
find really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's because I mean, I'm not saying they don't, or making judgment call, but I think the reason we've always kind of made a very concerted effort to focus on the games is because of our passion for video games and speedrunning. We both love video games. We find them fascinating and interesting. And we've made a concerted effort to not make it about the personalities. Not we've specifically said what guests do we want to have on that'll be good for the podcast, that'll articulate things, but not, oh, they're really funny or they've got this big personality, we have to have them on, we don't care what game we're talking about.
Right.
We're
Yeah,
generally focused on the game.
we've got plenty of people in the community that we'd love to have on the episode, but we don't form our episodes that way. We pick the game
Yeah.
first and then we do that. I could name right now for you dozens of people in the community that I think would be great guests on the podcast, and just until the game comes up,
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Go ahead.
No, go. You're good.
Oh, I lost my train of thought.
Okay, that's fine. But yeah, I wonder if those podcasts have not done the same format as us because they know we exist, or because I mean, it's just, it is interesting. But I think a lot of the speedrunning stuff, even the YouTube stuff you can see on speedrunning, is very personality based. It is like, what speedrunner did this, and even the hobby as a whole, you have the kind of the celebrity speedrunners and people kind of focus on them, and I think that we've always tried to take the attention off of hopefully, except for this episode where we really are just talking a lot about ourselves in a positive manner, which whatever. Give us one for 2 years, okay? But we focus so much on the games, we'll really focus on maybe necessarily our personal lives or our personalities or the people we bring on's personalities. I think we've always tried to keep it game centric, and that's why we don't talk about speedrun drama. That's why we don't talk about GDQ drama. That's why we don't talk about a lot of other stuff that people might find interesting at the time or might ask about. It's just it's not what we do. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about we unlike the wonderful Warp World podcast that we love, we don't have a lot of hot takes. We just we like to talk about games and teach you stuff you didn't know. So
yeah, I remember what I was going to comment on. I just got done doing a speedrunning panel at this small little event in South Carolina called the Southeastern Game Exchange, and it's interesting to me. I don't think it's true of the entire community. This isn't a statement of the entire community, but it's interesting when I see people who are involved in collecting and in retro gaming sort of outside the speedrunning community. It's funny because it feels like there's a decent chunk of people, maybe not the majority, but a decent chunk of people who are interested in collecting as sort of a money-making venture or sort of a more of a historical sense. And I find it really interesting to listen to people talk about video gaming, collecting, and seeing people talk about retro video gaming, that you start to get a sense that they don't really love
games.
They don't love video games.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I covered. I don't. Did you get to listen to the pocket?
I've listened to.
Okay, yeah, it's something I meant to cover, and I don't know if I articulated enough. But I've had great experiences on Instagram's like the biggest collecting community I'm part of, but and some Facebook communities. Like I've had great experiences with people, but it really and a big reason why it hasn't become part of the podcast, like even though clearly it's somewhat a part of my video game interest, is that the people in those communities will just post a lot of pictures of like their little Samson and like their Flintstones Dinosaur Peak and like all their popular games, and they're not like posting pictures of playing video games or even like, oh hey, this is a fun hidden gem, it's only $5 but it's a really cool game and I'm glad I bought it. It's always kind of about the status, or and there's been kind of a recent kickback against that of people just like posting like playing games and saying like, I like video games, like here, check out this, even if it's a $5 game, if it's great, something like Cosmo Tank's a really fun game, doesn't matter if it's not rare, people don't know about it and it's cool.
Yeah, I
So
think
that's
that's
why
one
I
of the
think I
things
connect more with the speedrun community, is that like I don't care about, I like collecting stuff for a whole different, I don't even know exactly why, but I think it's interesting and I like it. But the ultimate thing is I play video games all the time, and a lot of people you'll hear, even like our boy Pat on CU podcast, like not play very video games that often, and or like at least play the retro video games that they're collecting often, and it's just kind of funny. It's like there's a disconnect between playing and owning.
That's one of the things that's really nice about being involved in the speedrunning community, is it does feel like everyone's here for the same reason, because they're really just enjoying playing games.
Shout out to The Bachelor, they're here for the right reasons. The right reasons. So Wandering Mind, you liked this question a lot. I want to hear your we'll call it your hot take. This will be our sponsored by Grand Pooh Bear hot take of the episode. Wandering Mind, how has covering events like GDQs and others changed since you started the podcast 2 years ago?
Well, I think when we started, we shied away from things like that. We did one episode about the Big 20. We did a Big 20 breakdown, like episode 6 or something like that. It was really early on. And then after that episode, we were like, do we want to talk about the Big 20 anymore? Like, is that the focus of the podcast? And then we started doing some recaps of some of the GDQs. And it's like, well, is that what we're talking about? Do we really want to talk about GDQs a lot? And I think over time, we sort of loosened up on it, because I think that there's room in our podcast for talking about sort of news and events that's has a little more longevity to it. I think it's really easy to get sort of caught up in the news cycle and do an episode that, a month from now is going to be basically meaningless. But I think talking about the Big 20s is something that does have, longevity to it. I think talking about the GDQs and sort of what was great at them and what wasn't, they stand forever on YouTube. You can always go back and watch them. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we shied away from it so much, but I know episode 11 we did Wacky Races and AGDQ 2016, and then the next week we did DuckTales and Big 20 number 4. And I think at that point we're like, are we going to keep doing this all the time or what? And really, as the podcast has kind of started and grown, these events have become more and more frequent. I would say when the podcast started, it was really just GDQs, and Big 20 started growing a ton, and then there's stuff like Californiathon and Buckeye Speed Bash and Smash the Record. Just there's all kinds of tournaments and things have popped up, and so I think it keeps things fresh. I think, like you said, it does have more longevity. People go back and know who won Big 20 number 4 or whatever, or they remember runs from a GDQ. I think it's why we shy away from having episodes like what world records were beaten this week. There's people who do great content for stuff like that. Like White Hat has a YouTube channel where he just does like the weekly NES world records, and it's like an update, and that's super cool. But I think it would make for kind of a dull podcast experience. But I don't know. I've enjoyed doing them. I think it's tough to think of unique ways to approach the format other than like, here's the stuff we liked from the event. I mean, we've tried to talk a bit about our experiences with the event, like casually and just having fun and what we did, but I'd just say that's maybe the struggle going forward, is like, how do we keep it fresh other than just a list of cool runs, so
yeah, it's definitely a challenge formulating those ideas into like an actual cogent episode.
Yeah, so let us know, maybe you have ideas, just speak up in that Discord. I like this one. You're gonna like my answer, I think. Mr. Pizak says, what's the number one game you played through TFS that you never would have played otherwise?
All right, I'm interested in hearing your answer.
Okay. Well, it depends on what you mean by number one game. Like, what's the actual just best game I played that I might not have ever played, or what is like the best experience? because that's for me the best experience I've had playing a game that I know I would have never played was Wanda Gamelon for sure.
I thought you
Like
were going
I
to say that.
yeah, I absolutely like for example, I never had played Mr. Gimmick, and I didn't beat Mr. Gimmick, but I played it a bit, and that's obviously a way better game than Wanda Gamelon. I'm sorry. But Wanda Gamelon was a really fun experience that I did not expect to like, and I mean it's not a great game, but it's just it has a lot of character, and it's way more interesting and way more playable than people make it out to be. And I just definitely never would have played it, especially just because I don't have the hardware for it. Like I don't have a CDI, I don't have the game, so like I had to set up a MAME and do a bunch of stuff to even get that to work. But that was a shocker. That I actually enjoyed that. I wanted to actually keep playing. Played for quite a bit more than I thought I would.
Yeah,
I
like
definitely extended it. I
pretty much
didn't
beat the game, didn't you? Like
yeah,
you got pretty close.
I was like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through,
which is pretty impressive. I mean, most people I've ever introduced to the game gave up in 5 minutes and said they hated it. So the fact that you were enjoying it enough to continue that far was
because it'd be really easy to pick that game up for like 5 or 10 minutes and be like, well, I've watched you do runs of it, I can speak to it now. I've felt the controls and stuff, but I liked it. What about you? You got anything that comes to mind?
So I think the low-hanging fruit is definitely Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy.
Best game ever made.
I definitely would not have ever played it because it's got multiple layers of reasons for me not to play it. It's a Mega Man on the Game Boy. But I was surprised that it was actually kind of fun. I was surprised that I was enjoying. I mean, it's become a big joke on the podcast that Chad hates Mega Man games. I don't hate Mega Man games. I actually quite like Mega Man games. I grew up on Mega Man X. I had a copy of Mega Man 1 and I think Mega Man 2, definitely Mega Man 1 as a kid. So I played a bunch of them, and I really enjoyed them. I wasn't very good at them. My complaint's usually just about how frustrating it is for me with my approach to speedrunning. I don't enjoy speedrunning it, but
yeah.
But Mega Man 2.
Any others that come to
there was
mind?
another one that I saw on the list. I did play quite a lot of James Bond 007. That was the other one I was going to mention.
That so bad.
And the other one in that same vein is Alien Syndrome. I would have never played Alien Syndrome. You tried so hard to get me to play Alien Syndrome, and I tried, and it bored me to death when I first tried it. And like compelling me to play as much of it as I did. It was an interesting experience. I don't know if I would ever really seriously consider speedrunning it. It's super low on the list.
It's a really... I love that game. I need to have world record. If Omega Number bobs me back, I will come back to it. But it is a very uninteresting speed game, and it's the reason why I don't submit it to GDQ anymore. Like, I like the game so much. I grew up with it as a kid, but like, it's really hard to sell someone on even watching it. Some ones that I've just looking through the list. Getsu Fumiden, I never probably would have played. That was decent. But Gummin's Proof, that was a fun experience for sure. I beat the whole game. And so I did the whole experience for that. But that's something we don't always get to do. And, it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be going in, but it was still like a really good, solid, like 7.5, and just kind of a fun time. What about you and Azure Striker Gunvolt?
So Azure Striker Gunvolt, I didn't feel compelled to finish the game, but I did play a lot more of it than I would have otherwise. I definitely see the appeal of it. It's a fun game. But it's just not my style. But it's in the same vein. It's a game that I wouldn't have played otherwise. If you hadn't wanted me to play it and you wanted to do an episode on it, I wouldn't have gotten around to it.
Yeah. I mean, and I definitely have to play more stuff than you do just because you've played more games than me. It's just kind of the way things go. And we have more stuff to go off of on episodes you've done. But like Evo was a really fun experience for me. I never played Evo, and I think I would have played that at some point, but who knows when. The Chinese D-Makes, I don't think I would have ever played those. I'm not going to say it was a positive experience, but it was... I would like to go back and play Chinese Link to the Past.
I'm waiting for you to finish Chinese Link to the Past.
It was so funny.
I just want to watch a whole stream of you playing it start to finish.
Yeah, and then there's so many games that I don't think I'm glad that I played too.
You could stream tonight, set your game to Super Mario 64, get to 10,000 followers, and for your 10,000 follower special, do Chinese Link to the Past.
Could do that. I like stuff that we played that I was kind of looking forward to that just didn't go well is stuff like Die Hard. Like, I love that game conceptually, but like that was a rough one. Wally Bear and California Raisins, those are rough. But yeah,
it's starting to feel like you're just picking out the bad games episodes, which I think are fantastic.
Bomberman 64 is one that was really hard for me to play. Like, I watched you play it, and I couldn't figure it out for some reason. That was frustrating. But, yeah, it's fun getting pushed and made to play games that I wouldn't normally play. And hopefully likewise.
I mean, we've done a lot of content, though. Like, just looking at the numbers,
it's a lot.
This episode coming out is our 76th upload. That includes the holiday specials, the pocket episodes, the full
we
episodes.
have like 3 episodes that are an ambiguous, like my OCD gets triggered because we have episodes and those are numbered, and pockets and those are numbered, and then we have like 3 specials that are just like out there, but they would be numbered now, but they're not then.
Right.
It bothers me. I just want you to know that. But I would say the worst game that I've played that I would never have played is the game you chose for me to play, which is Super Robin Hood. So thanks a lot, Cart Swap episode number 1.
You're welcome.
That was a cool idea.
Are we looking forward to a Cart Swap episode number 2?
Oh gosh, I might have to just. I'm so mad at you.
I promise I won't give you such a mean game. I thought that game was
a worse game.
I thought that game wasn't going to be so bad. You made me play Cosmo Tank, okay?
That was a good game. You loved that game.
It was a good game, but it was so tedious and dull.
It's not a great speed game.
No.
Okay. So moving on. I don't care if we ramble on. This is our episode. This episode's for us, Chad. This is for me and you.
Thanks, John.
This is our anniversary. This question is really tough, and I think there's right answers to it.
No, it's not. This one's super easy.
Stuck on a desert island with only one game. Which one is it? Is it SMW for you?
No, it's Breath of the Wild.
Oh, you're totally right. Yep, it's Breath of the Wild. I was gonna say it has to be a modern open world game, just because. That's all I was gonna say. But my favorite game of all time is Final Fantasy VII. But I wouldn't want to have just an RPG to play for the rest of my life. Yeah, Breath of the Wild's definitely the right call. I think that's the best game I've ever played in my life. In fact, I think we should probably do an episode on Breath of the Wild, even though it's not retro.
Okay, but right now, drop Breath of the Wild, drop modern games. What would be your Desert Island retro game?
Like what do we?
16-bit or earlier.
16-bit or earlier.
Yep.
So not 32-bit.
No.
So PlayStation 1's not retro. Okay. 16-bit or earlier. Okay. Do you have yours?
No.
Oh gosh, that's a tough one, because I don't care how long it is at that point. Gosh, that would be tough.
For me, it would probably be Harvest Moon. I know a lot of people don't love that game, but I can spend hours in it and not really care that much. So I think it's a good fit for you only get one game forever and you can just mill about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I should say an RPG then, but I don't really care about any of those RPGs. I guess I'll say like Mega Man X. Mega Man X is the best Mega Man game in my opinion, and it's a ton of fun. And you can just replay it a ton, but it doesn't have as much replay value as
I think I could do I could do Final Fantasy V as well. Final Fantasy V is a good fit.
Yeah, I just don't have any I don't like 16 or 8-bit RPGs, so it's really tough for me to think like what is my.
All right, I'll extend it to PlayStation for you.
Space kids.
If you can include PlayStation, what's it going to be for you?
I mean, it would probably be Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
But like that's not that interesting.
Yeah, it's not interesting.
Because like I want a platform. I'd miss platforming so much. I like hitting a button and then you jump and then you land on something. It's great. So I think that's all of our questions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Over, and this is our last episode ever. Is that what we're announcing? Or
it's been a really great time. Glad that you guys could join us.
Sorry guys, I shouldn't even tease people. I do want to give a shout out to our Patreon, and I wanted to shout this out at the beginning. I forgot, but it's a big reason why we're able to do what we do. We have to pay for hosting fees, we have to pay our producer, we have to do different stuff. So we really appreciate you guys who have been paying, guys and girls who have been paying us for some of you guys for several years. Right now we are $9 away from our Super Metroid goal. $9 a month away. So if we hit $150, we're at $141 right now. We will do a Super Metroid episode. Chad and I have never played the game. We have to casually play the game and then have somebody come on. I already have somebody in mind that I've talked to, but we'll see. We can debate who to have on. But feel free to contribute to that. We really appreciate everybody who's been making this possible, though. It really helps out. It would really suck to pay for this out of pocket for 2 years straight. That'd be frustrating.
And it's nice because when we have money coming in, we can pay for advertisements. It helps us build up a little more, and it makes us more excited about the project to have more people to talk to. There was a time, not so long ago, when we started this podcast and we wanted to do Q&A and we would get one question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now, 20 minutes before recording this episode, we asked for Q&A and we got like 6 great questions like right away.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so if you can do anything you can, you don't have to pay obviously in the Patreon, but if you can retweet our post, if you can, give us feedback on iTunes, all that stuff helps. We appreciate all of you guys who have done that. Like the iTunes reviews especially help you move up the ranks and just different stuff. But if you want to know what your money goes to, we don't talk about that often. Like we do have to pay hosting monthly. We've used that money generally to try and invest in the podcast. So whether it be equipment or like specifically paying like the CU podcast for them to shout us out, to buy cards to pass out at GDQs and stuff. So we've done it mostly to just try and grow the podcast up at this point. Who knows in the future, depending on what funds we have, maybe we can do more. But that's just kind of what we do now, and then save it for hopefully future investments in the podcast, whether it be paying for graphic design. Like, I mean, that's other stuff. Like in the past year, our logos changed, if you noticed, from something terrible I made that I feel like I took it off the internet in a way that might not have been as legal, but I posted in a forum and I think the person said it was okay. Now we have paid for a very good, amazing icon from Yellow Killer Bee. We've got this overlay for our YouTube. Just we have to, we have to spend money for all those things. So that's where your money's going, just so you know. It's not going up our noses. So, that's a good way to end the podcast. Any last thoughts?
Kids, ask your parents what that means.
Nasal spray. What are you talking about? You got to keep clear nasal cavities.
So, John, if they want to hear more of your humor, where can they find that?
You can find me on Twitch at John Carls. I also have a YouTube at John Carls1. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at John Carls as well. Where can they find you, sir?
Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at Author Blues.
Please give a follow to Brian Morgenthaler. He is our producer. He's been doing this since like episode 4, I think. Episode 3 or 4 were his first episodes. And that's been, honestly, this podcast, we say it all the time and it's not lip service. I wish he got more credit. I wish people would like tweet at him and stuff. Although I don't think he even knows how to log into his Twitter, so maybe don't. But, we wouldn't be able to do this without him. It's already enough work to play the games, to write the notes, to record it, to post stuff, to post to social media, to respond to stuff on Discord. Like, it does take a decent amount of time to do this. If we had to edit as well, like, this thing would have ended a long time ago.
Yeah, if you want to hear what happens when you leave it to our capable hands, listen to the first few episodes.
If you really want it to keep going forever, like, the more money you give us, the more money we can give Brian, and it can stay on for forever, hopefully. So, huge thanks to him. You can find him at BMorgs TV on Twitter and on BMorgs TV on Twitch. He's been streaming horror games. He's been streaming Spiritual Warfare today on the NES. I was super excited.
He says he's going to learn to speedrun it.
That was the game that I brought up to Chad when I basically first met him. I said, I want to learn this, speedrun this game. And he's like, I'll help you route it. And then nothing ever came of it because of me. Yep. Let's be honest. I dropped the ball. I was scared. That's an encouragement right there. When I started the podcast, like I was scared to route or learn a new game. Like it was intimidating to me. And we get that question a lot from people. And now like it's so easy to pick up a new game and it's even like to talk about games and all that stuff. So you can create your own content. Just be, just do it. Just do it. And it'll get better over time. You just go listen to our first episode and tell us that we haven't gotten better over time. And then I'll say you're a lying person. And so if you have listened to this podcast and you're scared to speedrun or whatever, go out and do it. And we're here to support you. So
thanks for supporting us for 2 awesome years.
Yeah, we look forward to more. Hopefully we won't be stopping anytime soon. So many games we still want to do. And so thank you guys so much for all your support. It means the world to us, just to talk to you guys, to hear your words, to hear you guys reaching out to us in chat. And we look forward to the next year. We'll have some cool stuff planned for you. See ya. Chad's not going to say goodbye, so that's it. Bye. Bye-bye.